Hitting the West End in 1989, Miss Saigon follows the love story of Kim and Chris, a Vietnamese prostitute and an American soldier. The two lovers are forcibly separated at the fall of Saigon, leaving Kim behind to raise their child alone while Chris resumes a normal life in America. The musical's creators, Schomburg and Bourvil, recreate photographs of the war throughout the show. Though this may suggest historical accuracy, this is incredibly questionable. The day-to-day struggles of Vietnamese people are ignored, impossible romances are glorified, and the American dream is falsely made out to be the only thing that the Vietnamese people could cling to for hope.
Dreamland!
Every female character in Miss Saigon, bar one, is a prostitute, creating the image of a sleazy, sex-orientated Vietnam, where a woman's only viable option was to sell her body to soldiers. But this could not be further from the truth. As Heather Marie Sturr points out, Vietnamese women owned their own businesses and often took up regular employment. They could even find employment in the US Army itself, in cooking and cleaning roles. So by only showcasing prostitutes on stage, the representation of Vietnamese women and the soldiers' interactions with them is not wholly accurate. However, Miss Saigon does not aim to tell the story of every woman in Vietnam. It aims to tell the story of the mothers and children that the soldiers left there. And the most common way for soldiers to gain sexual contact with the woman was through prostitution. This hypersexualized representation is perhaps the easiest way to show this. A more realistic criticism would be that the relationship between Kim and Chris is incredibly romanticized to the point of meaninglessness. In the whole of the Vietnam War, marriages between the American soldiers and Vietnamese women only numbered at 9,000, a weak number in comparison to the 100,000 prostitutes in Saigon alone in 1974. Miss Saigon therefore represents a paper-thin element of the experiences soldiers and women faced. But Celine Perrin's Shimazu refuses to draw the line even here. Ultimately, it is ridiculous that an American GI could have sex with a prostitute once, and then have her immediately fall in love with him. Not once, over the 3 years where she has been abandoned in Vietnam by her soldier, does this love waver, and she even risks her own and her son's life to save it. Again, this is absurd. Mothers of American Asian children were shunned by society. Economic hardship would have relocated Kim to inhabitable environments, and constant fear of being put in a re-education camp would have eaten even the strongest of Vietnamese women alive. The fact that Kim could not let go of this love suggests that Vietnam was dependent on Americans to come and save the day. But this was something that they had failed to do the first time around, and it isn't accurate to presume that this hope did not die out. This isn't only evident in the character of Kim. The engineer also only finds hope in the land of the free. His American dream constantly tells the audience that all the Vietnamese wanted was to indulge in America's capitalist culture. Although the engineer is potentially a more accurate character than Kim, having been fathered by a Frenchman during their colonial rule, spending time in a re-education camp, and loving America because of the economic boom it brought to his brothel, even he is a far stretch of the truth. Although many Vietnamese people wanted to escape Vietnam, they didn't exactly love the country that had been bombing them either. Now on this note, Miss Saigon fails to demonstrate the hardships that Kim would have faced while fleeing Vietnam. What did she do to avoid being captured after the war? We have no idea. How did she survive her journey on the boat, which could have taken her as long as 6 months? We know that she found the journey incredibly difficult, but once again Chris acts as the hero in this scene.
1 month at sea, I was sure we'd drown, but I thought about Chris and we didn't go down.
Yet in reality, starvation, drowning and sexual abuse by fellow passengers and pirates probably took place. What was she forced to do when she arrived in Bangkok? Putting on sex shows must have been a humiliating experience for a young mother, tormented by the fact she could never hide her performances from her son. David Schlossman accuses the musical of romanticizing prostitution for this exact reason. The only struggle we see Kim deal with is the death of Tui. But murdering your fiancé was not something that every prostitute or mother faced in the late 1970s. Schlossman is certainly right to attack the fact that actual historical struggles are completely overlooked. But perhaps the most important factual inaccuracy is the way in which the musical shows America's response to the children soldiers fathered. Firstly, they call these children Bù Đói, the dust of life. But, as Helen Sneed points out, Bù Đói never actually referred to this before the musical. It actually referred to homeless people in cities and children in gangs, so the term has been taken entirely out of context. Secondly, America didn't care for these children until December 1987 with the Ameri-Asian Homecoming Act, which after a long struggle finally allowed these children American citizenship. But in Miss Saigon, we see John running a huge campaign to find the children's fathers as early as 1978, almost 10 years too early. In fact, in the 1970s, the US Defense Department released a statement saying, "The care and welfare of these unfortunate children has never been and is not now considered an area of government responsibility." Furthermore, only 3% of these children would ever find their fathers, let alone be able to begin a life with them as young as Kim's son is able to. Most of the 26,000 that entered America would be in their 30s and 40s. Considering the fact that Miss Saigon is teaching its audience about a little well-known part of history, it is incredibly important that it bothers to teach it well. Miss Saigon isn't entirely inaccurate. It shows the explosion of the sex work industry with the arrival of American soldiers, the struggles the Vietnamese faced upon their departure, and the fact that there was an attempt to bring children over to America to their fathers. But the real struggles are downplayed far too much, while America is hyped up far more than it should have been, always playing the hero that it just wasn't. David Muir points out that Kim's son's life wouldn't have improved that much in the USA. He would have had a roof over his head, but dealing with the suicide of his mother, facing intense racism, and living with parents he'd never met before wasn't necessarily better. But throughout the musical, it is implied that America will fix all of his and Kim's problems. Ultimately, historically very little can be taken from Miss Saigon. By skipping over the intense suffering of refugee mothers and their children, all we can take from it is a tragic love story, which in itself probably never took place. Focus needed to be taken away from the romance, and onto the real hardships that made life difficult for Vietnamese people after the Vietnam War.